How's it going, fellow Starlings? Welcome back to a brand new Stargirl recap, review, and breakdown of Chapter 10. And finally we have Jenny back in the story, the new Green Lantern. But not only that, I feel like this episode has pushed forward the next, hopefully accelerated part of the story, because, you know, I am enjoying this season, but I feel like, and what I've been echoing each and every review towards the end, I feel like we need the next thing, like the next bit of momentum to really start snowballing. And I feel like what happened with Jenny this episode, the ties to Todd and what could be going on there, obviously the Shade and his deception this episode with what happened with that, a little bit of Eclipso with what happened with Courtney at the end. It feels like finally something a little bit more is about to happen, or is happening, which I am very happy to say. So let's get into the details of Chapter 10. By the way, if you are a Doom Patrol fan, I think you would like the video I uploaded on Monday, I believe it was. I had a discussion and interview with writer and producer Shoshana Sachi from Doom Patrol. It was awesome being able to speak to her for around 40 minutes. So if you want a little bit of brain picking with regards to Doom Patrol, go check that out. But other than that, like this video if you do go on to enjoy it, of course, guys, and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you aren't subscribed already. So, the very beginning of this episode, I was really happy with it, actually, because I didn't know how much more flashbacky kind of things we were going to get this season, especially after the last episode was the rumored or, like, you know, anticipated big flashback episode, of which I don't think we got as many as I thought a lot of us were going to get, but that's what I mean. I'm glad that it somewhat still continues, and hopefully will in episodes to come in little bits and places, hopefully. So this scene was really nice for me because it showed the relationship that Pat and Starman had, because I think a lot of us were agreeing last episode that Pat not only gets treated like a little bit of shite, so to speak, by the other JSA members, but Starman himself, like, for example, it's like, hey, Pat, let the members ask the question. It's just like, what, a sidekick isn't a member? It's like stuff like that really rubbed me up the wrong way. But in this moment, you do see, despite Sylvester talking about his parents maybe having a little bit of them in him and whatnot, Pat is very sentimental to him, and family isn't born, it's chosen and whatnot. And it just shows that bond they have. And I think this is really important because we've obviously got the Sylvester Pemberton in real life, present day, somewhat cooking in the background somewhere. And my God, is that the most slow burning storyline I've probably ever experienced in the show. Obviously deliberately so, but that was teased at the end of last season, and we've only had, like, what? Here, have 2 little grains of rice, you know, throughout the whole season so far. And what, we're on freaking episode 10 now? So I'm not complaining, by the way. I'm just saying I feel like what I've speculated before with him is maybe a lot of us are thinking he's an imposter, this, that, and the other, but what if he is the real Starman? And, you know, scenes like this will offer for a whole new thing next season, especially with, I think, the fact that apparently he's been made a series regular for season 3, meaning that Sylvester Pemberton would be in most episodes next year. It just makes me think, long story short, bottom line here, that Sylvester coming back in present day is actually him. It's just we have no bloody idea as to how he didn't die all of those years ago. But once more, this scene is kind of making me look forward to, if he is the real Sylvester, what kind of relationship we're going to have with Pat and Starman again. But when we go back into the present day scenes, it obviously picks up with Courtney having a go at her family, well, just Barbara and Pat mainly. And I do get this. I was a bit apprehensive and worried that I'd get a bit annoyed by it. I didn't want the drama to be contrived. You know, I understood that Courtney would be frustrated in some extent, but, you know, also reading your comments from last week's episode, it doesn't actually seem that bad, other than the fact that he kept information and he thought that maybe she'd be better off not knowing for some time. It's not like the most diabolical secret that's being kept, but I do understand, of course, from Courtney's perspective, when they established no more secrets, no more nothing like that, that if she then finds out something else that he's been keeping, it would make you a little bit shook. And I do think that she had a very good point, that the fact that Yolanda could have known that the JSA, not just one member as well, more than one member, opted in to murder, would make her feel a whole lot better about what she did. But then again, in of itself, the thing I wasn't so mega keen on is the whole murder thing in the first place, because it's like, I do get it, and maybe there was another way, but at the time of the JSA back then, I think I'm pretty firm in where I stand in that if you had no other option, if you had your family threatened, the way Starman was saying it at the beginning of this episode, and you had no other alternatives, it is kind of like what Wildcat did with Brainwave. In this moment though, the Shade, I believe, just fell through the roof in mist form. He has like mist coming from the wounds in his stomach or whatever, and as we learn later on, like, I think a lot of his declining health state is actually a result of the shard, or the Heart of Darkness, well, fracturing into lots of shards. But obviously that was kept from us for a few episodes, because the one thing I'm a bit not confused about is just that he's been like this for multiple episodes now, like holding his stomach together or whatever with whatever Eclipso did. So yeah, finally now it's being picked up properly. And to be honest, I'm glad it turned into a bit of a deception storyline, because I'm not gonna lie, if the Shade had no other alternative than to do it this way through regaining his health and his powers by deceiving Courtney's family and Barbara herself, I don't really blame him, because, do you know what I mean? Like, he would have died otherwise, I guess, unless he kind of lied about it. So what I'm trying to say here is that the Shade he's not been painted out so much as a villain, and he's never been an outright villain, and I've liked how they've gone into that, but I've also liked how now they've kind of walked him back into a little bit of the other direction. It's not like he did the most terrible thing through lying about this so he could get healed again, but it shows that he is still a little bit jammy, and I'm glad that he's not been made out to have a massive redemption arc this season. But even though we did learn things like, oh, he didn't actually kill me from Dr. Magnider and stuff, I like the to and fro with the characteristics of the Shade, like good and a little bit not so evil, but a little bit you can't really trust him. And not only that, Jonathan Cake is just fantastic. But just to add on to that for a second, I do need to like dial back a couple of seconds. He did this knowing that it would summon Eclipso later on, which is pretty messed up. I'm not gonna lie, that is pretty messed up, because Eclipso could have just torn through Pat, Courtney, and look what did happen to Courtney. So yeah, actually, I'm kind of rethinking it. Obviously, he's not the most evil person, but what he did this episode is pretty bad. I also like how they set this up at the beginning of the episode, and I didn't see this. I kind of believed the Shade through Pat saying, this guy's trying to manipulate us the way he did Starman and stuff, and he came across sincere, but turned out Pat was more or less right. Now, with what the Shade revealed as to how to fuse the little shards back together, Courtney tried to use the Cosmic Staff. That proved futile because it's still not fixed. And I don't get why the show hasn't leaned into this. And maybe I'm being impatient at this point, because maybe they are in the final couple of episodes or so. But you would have thought by now Pat would have leaned into, oh, Ted Knight made the staff, but, I don't know what happened to him. But do you remember how I keep articulating each review at the minute that there's another story for another time with regards to the creator of the Cosmic Staff? Like, why aren't they looking into how to actually heal the staff? Or, I was thinking if they weren't going to go down that route, Sylvester would have come back in and he would have been able to help with healing the staff. Maybe that's still going to happen. But yeah, apparently now the other alternative is to use Jenny's Green Lantern energy to fuse the shard back together. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how they jumped to these conclusions. I think the Shade just did say it needed something of light, but it's just like, how do you know that the Green Lantern energy is gonna work? I know it is somewhat of a beacon of light, but that's me being nitpicky. I suppose they were just like, I suppose if we use her green laser, it'll work over your Cosmic Staff laser. And so that kind of started the hunt after Jenny again, after the last time we saw her was like, what, episode 4? Was it that long ago? Meanwhile, with Beth Chapel, we have like a little funny scene with her parents and how they're like thinking, is she okay with her goggles and stuff? But understandably, Beth is apprehensive after the Eclipso trolling that she had last episode, so she wants to see if they are indeed real, and she ends up just kind of walking out on them, saying, look, you guys, sort your own shit out, I'm gonna go help my friends, I don't really need you as much as you think I need you anymore and whatnot. But the only thing I was thinking with Courtney going off to find Jenny with Pat, and Beth's purpose of being there is to protect the family from, possibly Eclipso and the Shade being there laying on the sofa. Look, I like Beth Chapel, but one thing I do agree with the comment section of each review is that in fights and in a protective measure, she can't really do anything. at all. Like anything. Like, she needs to be trained. And I wish that the new Dr. Midnight had some kind of... I know the goggles, you can summon holograms with the way that she kind of confused Artemis in that moment, showing her the convict mugshots of her parents. But other than that, like, what are you going to do if the Shade wants to go? She would literally do that thing where she's like, woo, you know... So I want the writers to give Beth Chapel more means of protecting herself. I think one thing this show needs to do in the next season is to really show some kind of training montagey stuff. And hopefully, to be honest, that could come in and could already be a part of the plan, to be honest, with Sylvester coming back in, the original, well, not the original Starman, but also maybe Dr. Charles McNider coming out of the Shadowlands. Maybe like me saying all of this, they've already got it planned. But I think it needs to happen, because I just don't believe that Beth Chapel can protect Courtney's family this episode. It's just, no. So after a little bit of the card journey, going over things that we've more or less already discussed, this then comes to a point of where Pat points out this little newspaper of where there's this green fire burns federal building, follows similar fire responsible for recent burning of a derelict orphanage. So it looks like Jenny has been using her Green Lantern powers to, yeah, cause a little bit of trouble to the point of burning buildings down. Pat mentions he's in Civic City and there's only one place that he would go if he was there. Now, this somewhat confused me because they showed that he had a little place, his little workspace with Starman, and each member had their own. But in this moment in the car, they cut to the scene of the JSA HQ table, the little meeting room. And later on, he said he hasn't been here in 10 years. But if that place is connected to this place underground, the little workspace room for him and Starman, I don't get why they showed that in this episode, because they were there in season 1. Like, that's where Courtney, you know, found the artifacts and stuff, and Pat was walking. So you have been there in 10 years, Pat, unless I'm being stupid. But if that little JSA round table and stuff isn't connected to the workspace room, then why show it at all in this episode? Meanwhile, in jail, though, I like how they showed that Grundy is looking after Rick by giving him some apples and stuff. Other than that, that's more or less the only update. I just, as far as speculation, people are like, is Grundy going to break Rick out of jail? You would have thought maybe if that was the case, though, it would have already happened. And even in the first place, I did consider that, but I was just like, that would be like, what, is he going to be on the run forever and whatnot? I really don't know how they're going to resolve this storyline with Rick, because what he did, unless the uncle doesn't press charges or whatever, I don't know how he's going to get out of there. And clearly the uncle hasn't changed his mind right now because he's still in jail. So looking forward to see where this goes for Rick, especially considering he hasn't even got the hourglass anymore. And, you know, we've only got a few episodes left. Like, within the next couple of episodes, is he going to flick through his dad's journal and recreate the hourglass? There's a lot of things that Stargirl has got left to do, to be honest, in only a few episodes' time. Up next, we get a little bit of a Shade origin. Now, this is something I really didn't expect, but I'm glad they did. I think I expected it at some point in the season, but I thought maybe it would have come a bit earlier, but I guess it's around about now, and that is where we have Dr. McNider saying that he, you know, he's in the Shadowlands and his connection has got a lot stronger. He actually reveals in this conversation to Beth that the Shade saved him, and that we learn a little bit more about the Shade, the, oh, is he good, is he bad kind of side of him, and that is that the Shade may have toyed at some point with him playing supervillain for a moment, as Dr. Charles McNider put it, but I don't think he ever wanted any part in killing the JSA, and that he was actually trying to pull Charles McNider to safety in that moment from way back in episode 1, well, of season 1, the 10-year flashback, well, 11 now, I suppose, of when he was dragged and lost into the shadows. And the only thing I was thinking about that, like, why couldn't he just puke him back out at some point? But I'm guessing he didn't necessarily know how to do that. We get more of his backstory with how, in the 1800s, Richard Swift was a bit of a con man, a thief, and he was hired to procure the Black Diamond, but instead, he just had a forgery made of the Black Diamond. And that is not such a great idea because it was for a group named the Men of Tears, and they had heard about the story of the Lost Island, the Black Diamond, the ritual to summon someone like Eclipso, so they wanted to go ahead and do that. But the thing is, the ritual that was required a sacrifice, and they thought they may as well use the Shade or Richard Swift at the time. During the ritual, since it was a fake, it obviously didn't go according to plan, and that's how the Shade became somewhat this vessel and conduit for the misty energy of the Shadowlands, and that is indeed how he got his powers. I feel like this is where the show is starting to really set up Dr. Charles McNider returning, because he says he will try and help Beth as much as he can from the Shadowlands, but he's not sure if it's possible to bring him back, when it's like, Obviously, this is probably going to try and happen at some point. In this moment as well, we get quite a big update that will probably be very helpful for episodes to come, and that is finally the JSA confidential files on Eclipso were unlocked. So Beth is like looking at all of this, and this is how we somewhat slowly in the episode get to the reveal of, oh, yeah, we shouldn't be doing what the Shade said because this is going to backfire, and Beth learns that it actually summons Eclipso, bringing the shards back together. I also appreciated the extra context we got of the Shade and his sister, and just how he was when his sister was still alive until time took her from him. So as he said himself, like, you know, I tried not to abuse my power when you were by my side because he had unspeakable power, but then when time took her from him, because obviously he's immortal, when he got access to that power, she would have aged, and whilst they were together and she would have gone round with him, he was alright for some time, but then he lost his way after she would have died, I suppose, of old age. And in this moment, obviously, this is because his health is declining. And I'm guessing Barbara looks just like her. Now, I do wonder if that means we're going to get a little bit of a flashback to him and his sister, where they're just going to use the actress for Barbara. That could happen. It might not happen. I don't know what flashback they would really show with that. Maybe his first encounter with Eclipso. Up next, though, we had Pat and Courtney rise up on this little elevator in the car. That was pretty awesome. I love the Easter eggs on the wall of Green Arrow and Speedy stop the spider, the vigilante retires, we even had Shining Knight, I believe, defeat Deathbolt, and then the whole newspaper clipping of who are the 7 soldiers of victory. And I want the Shining Knight back. Where I miss this. Like, I miss little bits like that from season 1. Why haven't we got that back? They realize that Jenny's bags are on the floor, so they realize that she's been staying there. Through some of the things that she's left behind, they realize where she's gone, and that is the Helix Institute for Youth Rehabilitation, because somebody named Todd Rice, lo and behold her brother, has apparently been staying there. But this is where a whole other little fishy part of the story unfolds, because clearly when Pat and Courtney get there, they weren't being fully transparent with what's been going on. Apparently Jenny was already there though, and that's where they find her and then say that they need her help. She explains that Todd's adoption files were sealed, so she tried to break in, but obviously with her emotions, and she doesn't really have much control over her powers or her emotions. Just like with Green Lantern powers, it reacts off of her emotions, so that's how the fires ended up happening. He was arrested for shoplifting a few months ago. He ended up here, but apparently he vanished last week. Now, the thing is, he probably hasn't vanished from that place, because we did have the creepy lady looking out the window ringing a Mr. Bones. She tells Mr. Bones that, did you know that Todd Rice had a sister? He didn't. But then she says, I told them that Todd wasn't here. And that just spells out to me that, well, she told them that, but that doesn't mean that he isn't still here. So I'm wondering if they're going to be poking into potentially his power set because he's Obsidian from the comics. I can imagine where they're going with this. I don't want to go too deep into it just in case it could give away something, but I think Mr. Bones, and depending on how they adapt it in this iteration, has probably been poking into Todd and realized that maybe he is Alan Scott's son or something, and they're just trying to capitalize on that, and that's why he's disappeared. I would love your theories into that. Personally, I think they might be going into the whole weird-ass genetic experiments there, but, you know, as I always say, innovations with adaptations, so who knows exactly what they're going to do with this. But I think when we finally meet Todd, if we finally meet Todd, he's going to be... It might be one of those storylines where, like on Superman and Lois, like we had that guy who was, you know, vibrating with the Kryptonian powers. He didn't quite know how to handle the speed and everything, and it could be something like that. Now, as for Mike's story this episode, I was wondering when the whole Thunderbolt thing would pop up again this season. It happened this episode. So Mike was initially poking around with Stripe and whatnot. He leaves the house and goes to the pit stop, and he hears, after flicking a few switches, that there's this somewhat, you know, pink lightning across the sky, and he's thinking, obviously, that must be something to do with the Thunderbolt pen. And so he goes around on his bike, and it looks as though Jakeem has been wishing a few things that have backfired, such as a giant gumdrop, a gingerbread house, kind of like what Mike first experienced when he had the Thunderbolt. So I'm guessing in the next couple of episodes, if not the next episode, I haven't seen the promo yet, so I have no idea, that Jakeem might be low-key introduced, because you can't have someone running around making wishes that could backfire like that, because it could get somebody killed. So you have to think they're going to address that sooner rather than later. And so guys, we're more or less towards the end of the episode now when we have Pat and Courtney show the shards to Jenny. They explain the whole situation to her. She uses her ring to focus her Green Lantern power through it, which ignites a beam. And so the shards do indeed fuse back together, all at the same time. As you guys know, we had scenes of Beth just kind of freaking out like, oh crap, this can't happen. And then we cut back to, you know, the scene of where it's being fused back together and Eclipso arrives. And that's when the Shade's just like, I'm so sorry to deceive you, but mate, like, I have to care about myself, my own health. So, you know, as I said, I love Jonathan Cakes, Richard Swift, aka The Shade. I feel like this is a perfect depiction of how he can be both helpful this season, and now he's kind of gone back to self-serving, especially at the expense of what could have been a very bloody mess with Eclipso and Courtney and whatnot. But it didn't actually turn out as bad as what I thought. But I suppose that's in Eclipso's nature anyway. He doesn't want to exactly just, like, I don't know, just slice you up when he could. He feasts off of the soul. So if he can't get you to a place of where he can't feast on your soul, as we know, through making you do something bad or like making you feel guilty and dark and whatnot, he doesn't exactly kill you or slice you up. And he could do, though. I don't know why he doesn't, but this is when I guess he wants to get rid of Courtney because she is the one who does present a little bit of a threat to him with the cosmic staff, even though it's without its juice. And so he tossed a black diamond on the floor, and a little frickin' Shadowlands bubble frickin' puddle appears, just like with Cindy, and Courtney gets sucked into it. We do have Pat grab a spanner and Jenny try and do something, but they both get bitch slapped across the room. And that's more or less it. And I knew Cindy, nothing was wrong with Cindy when she got into that little bubble puddle or whatever I call it. And same with Courtney. So I'm guessing I'm going to get a little bit of an episode. This is random ass speculation. I don't think it's going to go exactly like this, but I'm guessing Cindy and Courtney are in the Shadowlands. They might meet up with Dr. Charles McNider and somehow all bust their way out of there, and I don't know, it might lead to a united front against Eclipso. That seems way too cliche predictable for me, but yeah, Courtney's gonna be fine. I completely understand how I mean, imagine being Pat right now. You've just lost your girlfriend slash partner's daughter, and she just disappeared in a little evil puddle. Like, how are you ever going to get her back? Yeah. So I thought this was a cool ending. I think the only thing that is hard to believe for me is, as I just kind of mentioned, I don't get why Eclipso, like, why does he bitch slap them? Why? I mean, I know it is contrived, I suppose, for the show, because it would just, like, ruin the character if they just died there and then, but you would have thought a demonic kind of being like him would just tear you up. Like, if he can't absorb your soul, screw it, I'm just gonna slice you up. But he doesn't. But other than that, you know, what I'm looking forward to after this episode, it was a little bit slow in parts, but what I am happy about is that we got checkpoints. I feel like checkpoints that are going to springboard us into the next bits. For example, Rick, we kind of know that Grundy's looking out for him. Okay, like, we know something's going to happen hopefully soon with that. Jenny, she's back in the fold. We've got some weird shit going on with Mr. Bones, and if you know a bit about him with the comics and experiments and whatnot that kind of unfold, it's probably going that way, and we're going to learn a bit more about that, but I feel like that arc could be going into next season quite a bit. And then just several other things, like the Thunderbolt and whatnot. Obviously, Eclipso, Courtney being where she is in the Shadowlands with probably Cindy. I'm looking forward to see where things go. I just think it's a bit of a shame that if the pacing really picks up in the last few episodes, that it wasn't kind of shown a few episodes prior. I feel like it's taken a while to get here, but I'm really enjoying it still. But I can't deny that Stargirl Season 2 has been quite a lot slower. But yeah, what did you guys think? Are you looking forward to see where things go in the final few episodes? Because we haven't got, I think, yeah, that was episode 10. We've only got 3 left. So yeah, that's more or less my thoughts on this episode, guys. So let me know what your theories, your speculation, because there is quite a bit of theory crafting to get into with this episode, with the things that I've mentioned. And I do read every single comment, so I'm really looking forward to see what you guys come up with. Other than that, like this video, subscribe if you want to stay up to date with more videos like this on the channel. I do have a Discord server, a Twitter, and all of those places where you can follow me pinned in the top pinned comment of the comment section, which is my comment, so expand that to see all of those links. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you starlings in the next video. Goodbye.